get to play as a team potentially if you're in a sport, but you get to grow up a little bit and also have some fun before you work your way into a profession, and you'll be more prepared to handle it. So I completely disagree with what they do most often.
Right, because John, the idea that like not just as an athlete but also as a person, as a human being, if you come in and you turn pro when you're 17 or something, and if maybe you have success, I mean, again, like you said, you're not peaking yet, but you have success, all that kind of pressure, everything that goes along with that, the traveling, being away from home, being away from family, your support group, it seems to me that'd be, especially for tennis, it'd be pretty tough to deal with all that if you were young.
For every person you hear that succeeds, there's a million that don't. You know, not everyone's Carlos Alcaraz. He's 1 in a billion. He's just a freak. He's an incredible player.
Yeah.
But most kids have no business doing that. In college now, it's become more competitive, and now they can offer money.
Oh, right.
Which is, was unheard of. You could actually, go after a guy and offer him something.
For the NIL stuff.
The NIL stuff. I mean, most of it obviously is going to football and basketball, but at least allows kids that otherwise, would have nothing in college to think maybe I should wait a couple of years.
Yeah. John, why do you attribute, like, you talk about Alcaraz, like, these guys are hitting the ball, and who was it, that Medvedev that played him, right? They hit the ball so hard. I have to, I mean, it's not like...
Not like us.
No, but I mean, like, well...
Way to insult, John.
No, I'm just saying, like...
We were dinosaurs.
Well, but I mean, you guys were every bit as big and as strong. Is it just the racket? I mean, you guys were playing... I can't believe what you were able to do with the size of the racket that you guys were playing with.
Why, is it bigger now?
Oh, yeah, it's bigger now, it's lighter now.
I didn't know that.
Look at
that thing.
Yeah.
That's what I played with till I was 23, which is, about... You add another 40%, that's the difference in power and the size of it. So the sweet spot's a lot bigger, so that's allowed kids at my academy, I'm at my academy right now, that hit 12, 14-year-olds hit the ball harder than me.
John just showed us his wooden racket. Did you win Wimbledon with that racket? That kind of racket?
I did. I'm one of the only records I still have, and I think I will always have it, is I'm the last male player to win a major with a wooden racket.
Wow, that's rad.
So
what if somebody made a storm? Well, it came back onto the scene with one of those rackets. How long do you think they'd last? You can't compete with one of those, right?
Well, if you played one event, Carlos Alcaraz could play with anything.
What about Federer? Whose
Federer.
game? Federer seemed to me had like such, and I remember over the years, watched a lot of matches of his that you've called, many. He has, you really like the way he played, his style, and he was so graceful, and I don't know, how would you describe it?
He's the most beautiful player I've ever seen. I idolized Rod Laver. He was awesome. He's like the Brezhnev of tennis. That's how I would describe him. Where, you look at Rafael Nadal, that's not your typical or prototypical tennis player. His body, he looked, a lot bigger up top. When we grew up, they were like, don't lift.
Right.
You don't want to get, too
Jason
big
got
up
that
here.
same memo.
Yeah.
I was like, don't worry,
Who do you think you'd match up best with today?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like another lefty? No.
You mean who would I play like, or who would I match up?
If apples were to apples today, as far as age goes and equipment goes, who do you think you'd have the most
success,
the most entertaining match with?
The dream would be to play Roger Federer at Wimbledon. The nightmare would be to play Rafael Nadal at Roland Garros on clay. Even though I grew up on clay, and that was my best surface till I turned pro.
Wow.
But what he did was insane.
Why don't people still serve and volley like you used to? I used to find that so fun. I feel like Becker was like the last one to do it, right?
That's correct. What they changed the court speeds. They slowed it down at Wimbledon. They did the same at the like Indian Wells or the U.S. Open. Actually, U.S. Open is fairly quick, so you're seeing it come back a little bit with Alcaraz, and people always imitate the top guys. But the explosion necessary to come in point after point, I don't think people realize that takes a physical toll.
Right.
So it's easier to serve big. These guys are bigger. Medvedev 6'6". The average player's gone from,
He's
6'6". So the average player's gone from 5'10", 5'9" to 10 to 6'2". 6'3" even, Djokovic is 6'2" and a half, Murray 6'3". It used to be 6'1", that would be Sampras, Federer and Nadal.
Yeah.
But players are getting more athletic, taller, so if you combine it with these rackets, the ball's coming back faster, unless you stand 20 feet behind the baseline like Medvedev.
Yeah, that was.
And so it's tougher to get close to the net.
Right.
We'll be right back. Big thanks to ZipRecruiter for their support. Guys, you know who I'm grateful for? The two guys listening right now recording this for me. I love them very much, Bennett and Rob. They're like my family. Couldn't do the show without them. And every single day, I say a prayer for them, and I love them. And I have photos of them on my refrigerator.
We love you too, Shawnee.
Thank you. Love you, Shawnee. Thank you. It takes a team of people to make this show successful, just like it takes a solid team to make any business successful. So if you're hiring, how do you find the best people for your team? ZipRecruiter. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/smartless. Here's why you'll be grateful you tried ZipRecruiter for your hiring. ZipRecruiter uses smart technology to scan thousands of resumes to find the most qualified people for your job. For these two, we went through thousands of resumes and nobody was interested. And we landed, and I mean landed, on these two.
We still love you, Sean.
Wow, that was a wet one right through the microphone. You'll also get great match notifications. ZipRecruiter lets the most qualified people for your job know they are a great match for it and encourages them to apply. See why so many business owners and hiring managers are thankful for ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. We'd be super grateful if you could go to this exclusive web address right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/smartless. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/SMARTLESS. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Our thanks to Amazon Prime for supporting this episode of Smartless. You probably already know Amazon Prime offers a range of services like Prime Video, Amazon Prime Music, and Prime Fast free shipping. But let's take it one step further. It's this very collection that can help you pursue your passions and get more out of whatever you're into, or perhaps whatever you're just starting to get into. Prime helps you get more out of your interests. Take jazz, for example, right? I can do jazz. I'm doing jazz hands right now. Are you a fan? Great. You can browse Prime Video for a jazz doc or a jazz-centric movie, or listen to the sweet sounds of smooth jazz on Amazon Prime Music. And hey, while listening to a jazz playlist, you might just be inspired to up your knowledge and use Prime shipping to get a book about the legendary Miles Davis delivered to your door. There are tons of scenarios where Prime could make life a little richer that for me to list them all would be impossible. From shopping to streaming to saving, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hey gang, Jason here. November is Diabetes Awareness Month, a time to bring attention to diabetes. So let's talk a little bit about that. Managing diabetes requires a lot of effort, and unfortunately a lot of people living with it don't feel understood because not many people know what it really takes to manage the condition. Well, that's where Medtronic Diabetes comes in. Medtronic makes devices to manage diabetes, and they're very passionate about supporting the community, which is why they've launched their Blue Balloon Challenge to raise awareness. The balloon represents the mental load and constant decision-making that people living with diabetes are faced with. It's a constant balancing act, trying to keep blood sugars in range while living their life. Medtronic Diabetes wants you to join the challenge and help them spread awareness and support for the diabetes community. So, grab a blue balloon and try to keep it in the air while doing everyday things in your life. Tag Medtronic Diabetes on social media and use the hashtag Blue Balloon Challenge. We can all come together to help make the invisible visible. Visit MedtronicDiabetes.com/smartless to learn more. That's MedtronicDiabetes.com/smartless. All right, back to the show.
You know what's funny? You're talking about these guys who are coming on the scenes, Alcatraz as I call them, because I just like put a twist on it. You know what I mean, Jay?
You're amazing, man.
Sean's done it with me.
You thought
since Sean stayed out.
I'm with you.
Sean stayed out.
You talk about these new guys who come on. So Alcaraz has come on the last 2 years, and he's just been an absolute. He's exploded, like kind of seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, for us, for I'm not a huge. I don't follow it, the minutiae of tennis, but
well, he's number one in the world.
I know he is now, and I'm just saying before I didn't watch, I didn't know about it. I didn't know that he was the guy who was in the pipeline who was coming. I just got all of a sudden he was there and he was incredible. But John, you did the same thing. I mean, what I'm getting to is I remember distinctly. I remember being up in northern Canada watching you and Bjorn Borg play in those unbelievable. When I was a kid, those unbelievable matches from Wimbledon, and everybody's like, who's this guy? And you know all this stuff. He was like, he's brash. He's from New York. He doesn't give a shit. He won Wimbledon and then he fucking went and got pizza with his pals or so. I still remember that story.
Partying with the Pretenders.
You partied right?
Not really.
Among other people.
But the afro and the headband though was just so hostile.
Wait, I want to hear about partying with the Pretenders.
No, well, listen, who would you rather party with? A bunch of old farts at the dinner that we weren't sure how to go to, or some rock stars? I don't think that was a couple. I went to Wimbledon when I was 18. I was sent to play the juniors, and I broke through and qualified and made it to the semis of the main draw, and that completely changed my life. I didn't realize, what Wimbledon meant, except when I saw the guy you mentioned, my great rival Bjorn Borg.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him play a few matches when I was like 15 before I played there, and like hundreds of girls ran on the court, and it was like, oh my God, this is like tennis's version of Beatlemania. Or I go, I want to be a tennis player. Somehow I got to get some of that. And so, and then I want to just mention this because to practice what I preach, which is I actually went to college after that. I played professionally all through the summer. I was 21 in the world when I entered Stanford.
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's unheard of if anyone's even above 500. So I felt like I wasn't ready emotionally and wanted to experience being part of a team and going to Stanford. And I think that was good for me in my career as it ended up. And then you fast forward a couple of years, those are the matches where I played Borg 2 years in a row, 80, 81.
Incredible.
And so that was like the greatest, a great time for tennis. I was lucky. I came into what turned out to be a really important time where tennis was really growing. I mean, if you had told me that golf would outrate tennis the way it does now is on the networks, I would laugh at you.
Right.
In the 80s. Right. And so we haven't done nearly enough as a sport. We had the same ratings as basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd how far we've gone the wrong way. Pickleball. If I hear pickleball one more goddamn time,
that was my question.
I'm gonna fucking. I'm with you on the.
Yeah, that's your cue, Sean. Go for it, buddy.
I was just going to say pickleball thoughts, but
you play a different kind of pickleball.
Joe, I played a kind when I played tennis.
Oh, what a day. What to play?
Education interesting is the people, dedicated teachers, caring parents, and administrators working to keep the students at the forefront of all decisions. You can hear my stories on 91.7 WBXU and always archived on our website, wbxu.org.
This traffic report is supported by Unbound.org. Southbound 275 after Milford, there's a wreck. There's also one approaching Eastgate. Northbound 75 at Paddock, a wreck on the right shoulder. And Cleves Hamilton Road, south of 275, there's a wreck.
It's All Things Considered. From NPR News, I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Juana Summers. Coming up, the new memoir from former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger,
in which he considers the past, present, and future of his political party.
I think in 10 years, there's not going to be a single person on earth that ever admits that they believed that Donald Trump was innocent.
First News.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. The 6-week-old strike against Detroit's big three automakers appears to be all but over after General Motors Motors joined rivals Ford and Stellantis today in agreeing to a tentative 4-year contract that includes 25% pay raises and cost of living adjustments. President Biden praised the deal, saying the collective bargaining was done in good faith because of the commitment and solidarity of UAW members.
These agreements ensure the iconic Big Three can still lead the world in quality and innovation.
The GM decision comes after the UAW widened its walkout over the weekend at the company's biggest North American plant in Tennessee. It also follows tentative agreements with Ford last week and Jeep maker Stellantis on Saturday. Workers at all three companies will return to the job as votes to ratify the contract take place over the next couple of weeks. Government officials in the UK are considering whether to raise the country's terror alert level after a spike in hate crimes against Jews and Muslims since the Israel-Gaza war began. Here's Lauren Frayer with more from London.
More than 100,000 people marched in a pro-Palestinian rally here Saturday. Such protests have become a fixture in London since the Israel-Gaza war began. They've been overwhelmingly peaceful, but about 100 people have been arrested for breaching order or inciting violence. Police say Iranian agents may be trying to stoke unrest. After some fringe protesters chanted the word jihad, government ministers are looking into tightening free speech laws and also redefining what extremism means to allow police to arrest more protesters. Lauren Fryer, NPR News, London.
Stocks finished higher on Wall Street. This is NPR.
Good afternoon. It's 5:33 and 46 degrees in Cincinnati. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Bill Reinhardt. Parents in the Forest Hill District want to put a hold on the school board's ability to enforce its controversial Culture of Kindness resolution until a federal judge rules on the legality. Last year, a group of parents sued the superintendent and the board after it passed the resolution banning assignments where students have to consider a person's race or gender identity. After pushback from some parents, the board said it would not enforce the resolution. But Natalie Hastings, a parent and plaintiff in the case, says they haven't honored that promise.
My own view is that it is being enforced, especially the Nago mural situation that happened right at the beginning of the school year.
At the start of this school year, a student-created mural promoting acceptance and diversity was covered up by the district. Forest Hills Superintendent Larry Hook says many in the community wanted to see the mural removed. The board attempted to get this case dismissed. That request was denied by the judge last week. Nurse practitioners say a licensing requirement in Indiana is contributing to higher health care costs and a lack of access for patients. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports the American Association of Nurse Practitioners includes Indiana among the states that limit nurse practitioners from doing their jobs.
Indiana requires collaborative practice agreements, which are contracts that require nurse practitioners to work under the supervision of a physician. Angela Lytle is a certified nurse midwife and the owner of Sacred Roots Midwifery. She says collaborative practice agreements were removed during the COVID-19 public health emergency, and it showed concerns about safety are outdated.
All of the terrible things that we've always been told would happen if the collaborative agreement was removed did not happen. It's a barrier, pure and simple.
Lytle says states without these agreements tend to have more midwife-attended births, which research shows improves patient outcomes. Many nurse practitioners also say requiring additional supervision when they already have the proper training contributes to Indiana's high healthcare costs. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
A hard freeze tonight with a low of 28. It's 46 degrees now.
Support comes from the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, presenting Thomas' Hamlet, November 17th and 19th at Music Hall. This grand opera is a musical setting of Shakespeare's tragic story. Louis Langray leads the CSO and May Festival course in this new touring production in collaboration with Paris' famed Opera Comique. Tickets at cincinnattisymphony.org. Season sponsor, Western and Southern.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Focus Features presenting The Holdovers. Paul Giamatti reunites with director Alexander Payne for the first time since Sideways. In select theaters Friday, everywhere November 10th. From Procter & Gamble, maker of ZzzQuil Pure Z's Gummies, designed with melatonin for occasional sleeplessness to help people fall asleep naturally. Learn more at ZzzQuil.com. And from ECMC Foundation at ecmcfoundation.org.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Scott Dexter.
For the first time in nearly a month, Congress is beginning its week with the Speaker of the House. Republicans ousted former Speaker Kevin McCarthy earlier this month, and it took a chaotic and painful 3 weeks for Republicans to replace him. The scenario surprises few at this point, least of all former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. The Illinois Republican often found himself in opposition to his party, especially after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Kinzinger was one of only 2 Republicans to serve on the Select Committee on January 6th, and he's memorialized that work, his life, and his political career in a new book called Renegade. Adam Kinzinger, welcome to All Things Considered.
Hey, thanks. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
The introduction of your book, like I could just envision you sitting there with the TV on, watching the initial 15 rounds of votes to put Kevin McCarthy into the speakership as you finished up the book and wrote that introduction. I'm assuming you were not surprised at all when he was eventually ousted from the job, given all the compromises he made to get it.
No, I think that writing was on the wall. When you cut a deal with what, I think Boehner aptly called the terrorist caucus, and you start cutting deals that make it where they hold you hostage, and then you come up against real deadlines like debt limit, like government shutdowns, I think it was inevitable.
You're talking about a minority of the caucus holding the rest of the caucus hostage, as you put it. I think that is the story of a lot of Republican office holders in the Trump era. And this is going to be the rest of the conversation, because I feel like once you start talking about Donald Trump, that's all you can talk about when it comes to things like this. But this is the crux of the question. What is the power that Trumpism and these forces of destruction hold over Republican voters right now? Why is it that they can attack an incumbent on social media and suddenly that is the end of that incumbent's career?
I think it's a number of things. So first off, people were fighting back against Trump a little more at the beginning, and then he kept winning. And so once he starts winning, and once people start, cease opposing him, then there becomes this air of inevitability. The other thing that I think isn't discussed enough, which is extremely important, is that leadership is all about the word leading. When Donald Trump, for instance, gets indicted on a number of different felonies, people's reaction that are supportive of Trump may be to initially defend him, but then they're going to watch the Republican debates. They're going to watch what other Republicans are saying. And when every other Republican is saying, this is a witch hunt, people will say, okay, well, they are reaffirming what I felt about Donald Trump. And again, the kind of question on this is, if you're a Republican member of Congress, for instance, and you speak out, you might lose your job. But if nobody speaks out, you're forcing yourself to actually do what you know in your heart is wrong.
And I think that gets to one of the threads of the book that I was most interested by, because I think people would expect you to speak out about Trumpism and Trump in this book, and you do. But there are also a lot of points where you look back with some regret, with sometimes some embarrassment about different ways that you went along with not necessarily Trump, but some of the things that led to Trumpism in the Republican Party over the course of your career. Tell me how you're thinking on that changed over time.
When you're in the heat of battle, and you need to raise money, for instance, and you recognize, which is something that I think is wrong and addictive and true, though, is that rage and fear is the best way to raise money. Well, I don't think I played as deeply and as kind of darkly as a lot of my party did, even in the early days. I was part of that. I recognize too that my vote against the first impeachment was really a vote of self-preservation. I was looking for a reason to vote against that first impeachment. I was on the fence. I found a reason, and I voted that way. And now looking back, I guess I'm glad I did, only in that it allowed me to survive to the next election and fight on the January 6th side of things. But I thought that was a vote of cowardice on my end. So I think it's important.
This was, I want to talk about that for a minute, actually.
Yeah.
This was the first Trump impeachment. This was tied to the pressure that he put on Volodymyr Zelensky at a time when Zelensky was desperate for American military support for reasons that became much more obvious to people over the years. But this is where Trump had that conversation and basically pressured him to investigate the Biden family. When you were sitting in a room by yourself in that period of time, did you think, gut feeling, this was an impeachable offense, or were you actually wavering on whether or not it rose to the level of impeachment?
Oh no, I thought it was an impeachable offense. What happened, though, is the Democrats rushed the process a little bit, and I allowed that to be the thing that convinced me that, oh, well, you know, I'd be all for impeachment, but we have to do a more thorough job of it. And so that was it was a vote of cowardice. At the same time, in a way, I probably wouldn't have survived the next election and been there for January 6th, but that's not an excuse for that vote.
In the end, was it partisanship? Was it fear? Was it calculation? Like, what was the main reason why you ended up voting against impeachment that first time?
Yeah, it was a little bit of fear and calculation. The calculation was, I've got to survive. And the fear was like, what happens if I'm the only one? Will I lose? Will I be on the front lines of all the threats that I eventually was on the front lines of? So I think that's a lot of what played into it.
I want to talk a little bit about the January 6th Commission. You, of course, voted for impeachment. You and Liz Cheney become the only Republicans on the commission. Take a step back. A year later, there's a way to look at the commission as a huge success, and I think there's also a way to look at it as a huge failure, right? On the success side, Trump's facing multiple criminal charges now, including 2 different cases directly tied to trying to overturn the election. On the failure side, though, he looks like he's on a path to winning the Republican presidential nomination. It looks like there is a possible chance that he returns to the White House after all of this. So I'm wondering how you think about this.
Well, I think of the part we could control as a great success. Now, in terms of changing opinions, we evidently couldn't do that. I know that we did a very good job of bringing that information out. I think Donald Trump is going to face justice only because of the work we were able to do, and America will have to make its own opinion. But I'll say this, I think in 10 years, if you could fast forward, there's not going to be a single person on earth that ever admits that they believed that Donald Trump was innocent.
Do you see a world where you get back into active politics?
You know, if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, I may have kind of hedged and said possibly, but I was exhausted. You know, the last 2 years, I'm coming to grip with the toll that it really did take on my family and I. But as I've kind of come to grips with it and time's gone on, yeah, I could see a possibility where I get involved again. I don't want to be in the House ever again, because I certainly did 12 years there. That's enough. And I'd be happy to support anybody that goes in with the right cause. As far as me, it's not a plan, but it's something I'd be open to.
Do you think you could get elected at this moment in the next 5 years?
No. Now, I don't know about the next 5 years. If I ran today, particularly as a Republican, I'd probably get crushed in the primary, and I'm okay with that because it's a party that, frankly, I don't feel a whole lot of allegiance to at the moment.
Do you still consider yourself a Republican?
I do, only because I'm not willing to give up, and only because I haven't changed. But I also know that if everything kind of tracks the way it is in 2024, I won't be voting Republican because, again, I think it's a simple question of democracy or no democracy, and the Republican Party represents right now a real slide to authoritarianism.
Would you vote for Joe Biden then?
Yeah, if it was Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I don't think there's any question I would vote for Joe Biden.
That is Adam Kinzinger, a former member of Congress and the author of the new book, Renegade. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
This is 91.7 WVXU. Early voting continues for the November 7th election in Ohio, which includes Issue 1, the Abortion Access and Reproductive Rights Amendment. Republican Governor Mike DeWine says Issue 1 will stop debate about sensible restrictions on abortion. The Issue 1 supporters are pushing back. State House correspondent Joe Ingles reports.
Columbus area residents Beth and Kyle Long held hands as they walked into the Franklin County Early Voting Center to cast their ballots for Issue 1. Beth, now 18 weeks pregnant after an in vitro fertilization process, is at the same point in her pregnancy as she was in January, when she got an abortion after learning the fetus she was carrying had a fatal condition.
Doctors came back and told us this is fatal. Limb-body wall complex. All of her organs except her heart are growing on the outside of her, enmeshed in the placenta. There is nothing we can do to go through and separate that. No fetus has ever survived this condition.
Beth said the rare condition posed a threat to her own life. Because of laws on abortion and not having the abortion coverage on her state insurance plan, the Longs had to travel to Pittsburgh to get an abortion. It was a process they described as humiliating. Their experience led them to do an ad for Issue 1, which would also guarantee Ohioans' rights to miscarriage care, fertility treatments, and birth control.
I think it's important for us to make sure that nobody else here in Ohio has to go through what we went through.
The Longs said they contacted Republican Governor Mike DeWine, a staunch opponent of abortion, about their situation multiple times. After doing a national news interview, they got a note from him saying he was sorry to hear about their experience and thanking them for sharing their story.
Voters tell us they're confused about issue 1.
The governor and First Lady Fran DeWine are the stars of an ad against issue 1, saying the amendment goes too far, but many Ohio...
All right. Man. Ugh. Alright. Grab some money.
Trade ministers from the Group of Seven Nations have called for an immediate end to measures that unnecessarily restrict trade. The ministers adopted a statement on Sunday at the meeting in Osaka. Their discussions centered on issues including how to respond to economic coercion and pressuring trading partners by restricting trade or raising tariffs. China suspended imports of Japanese seafood following the release of treated and diluted water into the ocean from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. This is the first time that calls for retracting the ban have been included in the outcome document of an international conference. This is NHK World Japan. The government has dispatched an anti-terrorism team in the southern Indian state of Kerala after a deadly blast. 3 explosions hit a meeting of the Jehovah's Witnesses religious group. At least 1 person was killed and more than 50 are injured. Police say it happened at a convention center on Sunday where more than 2,000 people had gathered. They suspect an explosive device was used. International NGO Human Rights Watch is criticizing the Pakistani government's decision to deport people it says are in the country illegally. Pakistan has become home to a large number of Afghans since the Taliban retook power in 2021. It is believed there are 1.7 million undocumented Afghan nationals. Earlier this month, Pakistani authorities urged all migrants without legal status to voluntarily leave the country by November 1st or face deportation. The government says Afghan nationals are suspected of being involved in more than a dozen suicide bombings this year. Authorities in the capital Islamabad demolished the homes of some Afghan nationals, prompting criticism from local residents. Human Rights Watch says many of those facing deportation would be at grave risk of persecution and other forms of abuse. People from Myanmar now living in Japan held a rally calling for democracy in their home country. Sunday marked 1,000 days since the military coup there. The demonstrators want to keep global attention on Myanmar's plight, even as the world's focus turns to conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine. About 200 people from Myanmar and their supporters gathered in central Tokyo to protest military rule. They chanted, "Free Myanmar, free our leaders."
The world seems to have forgotten Myanmar as time passed, but please support us until our pro-democracy movement wins.
The local human rights group says more than 4,000 civilians have been killed since the coup. A Japanese research team says it has conducted the first experiment that shows mouse embryos develop normally in space under microgravity conditions. In August 2021, the team sent frozen mouse embryos on board a rocket to the International Space Station. The embryos were thawed and cultured in the ISS for 4 days. The team found that embryos develop normally, whether under microgravity or under conditions with the same gravity as on Earth. Professor Wakayama Teruhiko of Yamanashi University was surprised at the result.
Beautiful. We expected that gravity would affect the development of embryos, but for the first time, the research found that it does not. The results surprised us.
Professor Wakayama says his team plans to transplant them into mice to see if microgravity affects how they give birth. This is Asian View from NHK World Japan.
We like to imagine that reality is a fixed thing, that we know how the universe is ordered, until we see the person sitting at the table who passed away a long time ago. Snap Judgment Spook returns just in time for All Hallowed Eve. Be afraid and do not listen.
Monday night at 10 on 91.7 WBSU and 88.5 WMUB. I'm Raja Abdurrahim, and I'm a reporter in the Jerusalem Bureau, and I've been covering the war in Gaza for the past 3 weeks. On Friday, I was reporting out a story about, basically it was a sentiment that I was starting to hear a lot from people, that death felt inevitable. There's now more than 8,000 deaths in Gaza, more than a third of them children, and we're hearing basically entire families are being killed in one strike. I spoke to a woman in Gaza. Hello. Her name is Ulfat al-Kurd. And she told me that 70 members of her family had been killed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, you know, she'd almost lost count of them. And what she was telling me, and what I've been hearing a lot, is that these huge death tolls, and when everybody around you, when everybody you love is being killed, it just makes people feel that their turn is next. The smell of death actually hangs in the air, because
there's so many bodies, more than 1,000, that are under the rubble because they don't have the equipment or they don't have the ability to get them out. I also spoke with a poet and an essayist, Mus'ab Abu Taha.
فأنا في أي لحظة كل شخص قاعد في مكانه بيسمع الصوت بحس إنه الإشي يعني جاي عليه بالضبط.
And he was telling me about how when you're sitting in your home or wherever you are and you hear the approach of a rocket, the sound feels like it's coming for you. Like it feels like it's intended for you. And I asked him some more questions, but I suddenly noticed that the messages weren't being delivered and I wasn't hearing back. And
I hope you and Lita will be very happy.
Oh, sure. Thanks, old man.
Married yesterday, was it?
A day before in New York.
What?
Will you wait outside a second, honey?
Rather low.
What? Yes. Yes, of course.
And 4.
On WGC, you just heard Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Horn Concerto No. 2, performed by the English Chamber Orchestra and featuring hornist Barry Tugwell. Support comes from the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, presenting Thomas' Hamlet, November 17th and 19th at Music Hall. This grand opera is a musical setting of Shakespeare's tragic story. Louis Langray leads the CSO and May Festival Course in this new touring production in collaboration with Paris's famed Opera Comique. Tickets at cincinnatissymphony.org. Season sponsor Western and Southern.
Support comes from I1 Unique Eyewear, a small, independent optical store featuring distinctive designer styles in a rainbow of colors. Their knowledgeable opticians will help you select the best frame and lenses for your everyday, athletic, or dress needs. Celebrating over 20 years on Hyde Park Square. Also in Dayton at the shops of Oakwood, i-1.com.
Can you believe that it's Halloween tomorrow? I feel like the whole season just went by without... It's the 30th already. How is that? Anyways, make sure to tune in on WGC at 6 tomorrow for our 2-hour Halloween special, Tunes from the Crypt, followed by Symphony Cast at 8, even though it's usually at 7. In the meantime, we're going to throw you off with thoughts of spring for Franz Schubert's Frühlingsglobe, or I Believe in Spring, which is performed now by pianist Laura Downs.
And to avoid that immediate reaction from sudden
Children's, they happen to have a...
Israelis had feared might.
Agassi played along with Michael Chang was on my team and Andy Roddick, so it was like tennis players playing, so it wasn't as painful as having to put up with a college player who didn't make it in tennis and now is one of the best pickleball players in the world, and it's a wiffle ball. You ever played wiffle ball outside and when you're a kid growing up? I did in Queens. It's not the same as baseball.
No, it's not. It's trash. I think it's total trash. I used to play paddle. I used to play paddle tennis in the beaches in Venice for years. That's a better game. At least you play with the tennis ball that have the air taken out of it. But the fucking pickleball, I'm sick of it. Oh, of course you do. Everybody does. It's like when people start getting the racquetball. Fat guys can stand in the middle. They don't even have to fucking walk. The ball comes to pickleball's the fucking same. You don't have to do shit.
Racquetball is out the San Fernando Valley.
Fucking wiffle.
Everyone calm down.
I can't wait till all these fucking rich assholes have to pave over their stupid... What was that over there? We had a fucking...
Pickleball court.
I'll tell you who the happiest people around are the doctors, because a lot of people have played. It's better to do something than nothing. So I'll go with that. But
I did legs yesterday.
What's that?
I worked on my legs yesterday. That means he squatted down to the stove, opened it up, pulled the pie out,
So he would get a good meal, yeah.
No, he had to put his feet around a fucking huge. He had a 10-pound bag of Chex Mix, and he had to use his feet to hold the ground as he opened it. Hey,
John, talk about what. I mean, obviously, winning. This is for the folks out there that don't play tennis, but something that you could talk to them about that's applicable. The gain you get from winning versus losing, because everybody has experience with winning and losing. How you've probably had to develop a muscle early on that could turn a negative into a positive and try to gain from it. Was losing, a tangible gain for you at times that you could speak about?
Well, obviously, as a father of 6, and having grown up being told that, losing builds character, and you learn more from losing than you do with winning, that there was something that was ingrained in me at a young age, and I do believe that it's true that you can sort of take a step back, and then it does help you in a lot of ways, not just on a tennis court. So that's what I try to tell the kids that are at my academy, try to nurture them. It's hard though, because you feel like the last place you want to be is on a tennis court when you're getting your ass kicked by someone. Especially if you ever got to the stage where you're playing a U.S. Open at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which would be like a dream come true for any professional tennis player, and then you get toasted by someone. So my problem is that at a certain point in my career, I think late 20s, I started getting more fearful of losing and not sort of embracing the idea that you need to learn from it, as opposed to facing up to it, and that hurt me. And I felt like I was a lesser player from that point forward. I had more of a fear of failure that sort of got in the way a little bit too much. You always have to battle that as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you end up getting on top of that, or is that still something that, like, do you take that onto the golf course? You take that into experimenting with music? Like, have you gotten on top of it and factor in losing as an acceptable result?
I go by the belief now that it's better to try and fail than not try at all.
Yeah.
Early on, when I was doing commentary, I stopped playing. Boy, it's like 30 years ago. The main tour, I played a Champion Seniors Tour for 25 more years. But at that time, I started to get some positive feedback about my commentary, and it's at a certain stage, people would come up to me, "You're a better commentator than you were a player." And I'm like, bullshit, okay? And it would really make me angry for quite a long time, for years. And then I thought to myself, I took a step back once, and I said, wait a minute. If they think I'm a better commentator than I was a player.
They never saw you play.
Well, that would be one possibility. Or else, hey, maybe I am a pretty damn good commentator, and I should take that as a compliment. So, this is and I have, but it took a long time. I guess would be the long answer to your question. Was that it took a lot of experiences that you referred to. The love of music as a hobby, getting a second chance. With a second marriage that worked out far better than the first. Trying to be the proper role model as best as possible for my kids as often as possible. I got 6 kids between my 2 marriages. Appreciating life, that I've been pretty damn lucky. That's what I try to give back at my academy, and even when I do with commentary, working around the players that I'll do next week when I go to Labor Cup, which is our version of the Ryder Cup. And try to just be around the guys, and if I can help them that little bit, 5%, 10%, that could make the difference, hopefully. So I've got a much better attitude than I did, although
I love that.
I think that some of the things that I used to hide my fear of failure, which was showing anger instead of like sitting there and start crying, that I don't think we were brought up to be, let's cry on the tennis court. So a lot of that time that was manifested in sort of turning into anger, or God forbid, I thought I had a decent sense of humor, and I would think of something funny like that was going on in the court, but I felt like when I grew up, it was like, you got to keep intense. you'll lose your edge if you do anything. Now you see guys that are out there like Federer. I was like, how the hell does this guy look like he's so happy to be out there?
Yeah.
Or, Alcaraz, the guy's smiling. Just you wait. Just give it a couple of years, you'll be miserable like the rest of us.
But I watched you. I think we talked about this once. I feel like, John, I wish that you would commentate on other sports because I know you're a big sports fan, and I'm like, I wish you would go on and commentate on football and basketball and hockey. I know, that would be you should. Have you ever thought about that? Didn't you say once you were gonna, or you did do it for basketball?
It's like a simulcast, like Peyton and Eli do.
I did Peyton and Eli just this past Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't count. Peyton and Eli don't count.
They're pretty damn good at that. I love it.
I love those guys.
But I actually last year